Okay, this is a video response to Piro 314. I made a video on evolution, free will, and consciousness, and it was kind of, at least part of it was directed towards some of the ideas he had been presenting in some of his videos. So he made a response to that video, which was a little strange, I have to say. It was, I think he would admit it was. The editing was a little weird, but that wasn't a big deal. But the problem I had was it wasn't really addressing the key points in the video that I made. And he kind of got hung up on the intuition thing. I don't even think I might be wrong about this, but I don't even think I brought up intuition, that he's using intuition in my video. I think we got latched on that a little bit in the comments, but yeah, I don't even think I really talked about it. So just to talk about the intuition thing, since you talked about it a lot in your video, Piro. Yeah, there's nothing actually wrong with using your intuition. And yes, pretty much everyone is using it at some point or another. The problem is that you're solely using your intuition to form this proposal, and forming conclusions or proposals or theories or whatever solely based on intuition and nothing more is not very strong, to say the least. Now, you're just denying that you're using intuition, and you clearly are using intuition. You're clearly making an inductive argument. So that's where I do see a problem with that. Now, you're claiming that others are using their intuition and saying these things. Well, maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more at another point when I get into that whole area that you were sort of describing. But what I want to really get to is just what you missed and what you didn't talk about in the video that I made to you, which was the whole issue that I brought forth. Was I basically was saying I have a better explanation, I think, to what was going on. Maybe I wasn't really clear, but so I'm going to repeat myself basically here in this video to try to make things a little more clear. And I'm having a hard time really expressing myself on this. I haven't written all of this down. All of these sorts of ideas are just sort of swirling around in my head, and I haven't really hatched them out. I think I even noted that something like that in the last video. So I'm having trouble with the language a little bit sometimes, and talking about evolution and things of that nature, and consciousness and all that. But I'm hoping things will be a little more clear this time. So what I'm saying is that, okay, first I'm going to critique you. All right, the first thing I'm going to say is what you are doing is just assuming off the bat that you have free will. And when I say free will, what I mean is the libertarian free will. Your consciousness, what you think of as yourself, your experience is actually doing something. When you lift your arm, what you consider yourself is doing it, not your body, not your brain. I mean, I know it's your brain, but not just, actions within your brain. Your consciousness is doing it. Personally, I would like an explanation for that. A lot of the philosophers and neuroscientists have the opposing view, which is that your consciousness is sort of basically along for the ride, and that things that you do are experienced by your consciousness after you do them. And things like the Lebesgue experiments. I don't know if you've ever talked about that. Maybe you have. Things like the Lebesgue experiments tend to suggest that. So there is some groundwork for all of this, and it would be nice to not just assume that you have free will. And I think I've tried to tell you this before, but I don't know if you were really understanding what I was saying. So you're just assuming that you have free will, and then you're projecting onto simpler life forms what you experience. So and that's why when we were talking about this in the comments, and you were saying that, you see intention, I'll say, well, that assumes an intender, and you were trying to say, no, I can see intention. Well, no, you have to assume that intention means something in the first place. So yeah, you're assuming that, and then you're using your intuition to say, well, I am experiencing these things, and I think I'm doing this because it seems that way, and so now I'm going to look back and look at these simpler life forms, and they're doing the same thing, it looks like to me. So there, that's it. It must have consciousness. I'm done. No, I think the better explanation, and this is what I was trying to convey in my last video, is if it is true that we don't have free will, and it looks that way from the scientific evidence, from just trying to put together a philosophy or a theory that allows free will to exist, it just seems like, it just appears, at least for now, that it's not a tenable idea philosophically or scientifically. So maybe and I'm pretty sure in the last video I did point out that I still have a lot of questions about that. But I think that, putting that aside, I think that the better explanation is that consciousness arose at a later point, at some point in the evolutionary processes, as a result of more and more complex neurological systems, which are basically nervous systems that have become more and more developed. And the nervous systems come from, simpler and simpler versions of those nervous systems. So the reason why you're able to look back and see that these simpler life forms are, appear to have intention, as you say, is because the reason why you're able to do that is because of the evolutionary process that produced the more complex nervous systems were, coming from the same place. And I think that makes more sense. That this complex nerve, a simpler nervous system or some type of reactionary system is just doing similar things to what the more complex nervous systems are doing. It doesn't mean that, I don't see why it has to mean there's a consciousness there. And again, to criticize your viewpoint, you have to argue that consciousness is a key feature of evolution. It's a very important part of evolution. You're actually making a huge evolutionary claim here, and you're not even addressing that aspect of it. That consciousness, the what we know of as consciousness, experience, subjective experience, is a huge factor in evolution. That seems to be what you're saying. I think it is what you're saying. And you need to have a little more explanation there. And I'm curious to know, where did it start? Did it start with the first replicating molecule? The first thing that was able to react to its environment as a unit. Well, then you get into if you're going to define it that way, then you make the special pleading argument that, well, no, it has to be life first. Well, define life. What does that mean? And then it gets, you're walking in treacherous waters at that point. So I just don't, I think it makes more sense that the complex neurological systems develop consciousness, not that a system that's reacting to environments, that's the only necessity for consciousness. I don't see that as a tenable idea at all. So I would like an explanation towards that end. Now, you're asking, well, how far back do you take it? Well, again, as I said in the other video, I don't make any claims as to what beings are experiencing and what beings are not experiencing. But I'm pretty sure there probably is some cutoff somewhere. I'm not skilled enough or expert enough to have a solid view on that. So yeah, I think that you're saying that we're using our intuition to develop these things. Well, no, we're not. No, we're not. We're using more than just intuition. For instance, when you're talking about how far back do you go and where do you cut off, and then you guys are just using your intuition. No, like for instance with human beings. I mean, it's absurd to say that we can make the same conclusions about very simple life forms as we can human beings. Let's just throw that out right now, because there's a big, huge difference in how we come to the conclusion that yes, other human beings are probably conscious. There's, solipsism is an idea that might be true, but it's just a safe assumption that it isn't. And we're able to do this for many reasons. You brought up one of them in your video, the structure thing. We have similar brain structure. We know that consciousness is produced in the brain. So therefore, we probably got conscious human beings, because I know I'm conscious, right? So there's that. There's also, I can go up to you and ask you if you're conscious or not. Well, you might be an automaton lying to me, but you are telling me that you're conscious. So there's that. There's just the natural interaction, is a much different thing. So let's just throw that talk out. I mean, that's crazy. It's not as arbitrary as you're making it seem. And then there's we also have interactions with animals, and they have similar types of brain structures, and we can observe some of their behaviors and see if they're conscious. So there probably are animals that are conscious, and I don't know how far back it goes. Well, why do I have to make a claim about that? I don't see why it's necessary to do that. I think you're the one making wild claims, and I don't think they're tenable at all. Okay, so hopefully we have a little more clarity there. I think my view makes more sense. My proposal, let's say, I'm in the same boat you are. I'm not saying these things are absolutely true, and I think I brought that up in my video before. I have a lot of questions about the whole free will thing and consciousness and all that. So, but I do think the explanation that I give, the model that I have presented, has more explanatory power. And hopefully you can address that. Okay, thanks for listening.